Join us on the Swim Monkey.
Swim Monkey TV.
On the Monkey.
Hello, everybody. Where is Sid? I'm waiting for my buddy Sid. I tell you what, we're here with Stories with Sid, and Sid must have gone off and coming back on tonight. We have a huge show tonight. We have 3 Olympians. We have 3 world record holders. We have excellent swimmers. We have a mayor. We have a mayor on. It's crazy. But you know, I see Sid coming back on, and I know he's probably chomping at the bit. And there he is. Oh, there he goes.
Oh, Sid. Man. It's crazy. The Wi-Fi, it was nuts. But, Joe, here we are. July 13th, Stories with Sid Cassidy. Thanks for being there, brother. Hey, Joe, we've got a lineup tonight, you know.
I was telling everybody, I'm like, oh, my gosh. We've got, like, if you just, you know, click off everything you want to talk about tonight, we got it.
Let's just start at the beginning, Joe. You and I, you know, I mean, you're a generation behind me. I was born in 57. I grew up swimming for Matson and reading Swimming World, and everything I ever was about was trying to be tougher, stronger. And I really found this affinity for the distance events. Bob Matson honed it in me. I swam for Don Easterly and always swam the mile in college. And I got out after marathon swimming. Tonight, we have 3 true legends. Big cast, Tim McKee says. I don't know if he's going to be up down there, but just on the show tonight, Joe, we've got 3 guys. Between the 3 of them, let's see, they've got 5, 6, and 20 individual NCAA titles, 20 Division I NCAA gold medals. Not to mention, they're all 3 in the International Swimming Hall of Fame. Looking at, every one of these guys held the world record in the 1500. Every one of them, and 2 of them in the 400. And all of them are just great gentlemen. So without any further ado, let's bring them in. I've got, in chronological order, let's bring in Mike Burton first. Mike Burton. And Mike... There you are. Mike was, he's the elder statesman of our group. Welcome, Mike. Tell us where you're coming from and what you're doing these days.
Well, thanks, Sid. I'm glad to be here. This is really great. I've not done anything like this before. But I'm coming from Billings, Montana in my antique home. It was built in 1915, and we've done some work on it since then. But it's a great place to live, and Billings, Montana is just a fun place to live.
All right. Well, for those younger athletes out there or coaches who might not remember, you know, Mike Burton went to 3 different Olympic trials. He went to his first one at age 17 in 1964 and finished fairly well from what I did my research today. But in 68 and 72, made the team. And not only made the team, in 68, Mike, you got 3 gold medals in and at the Altitude Mexico City Games. Unbelievable. I'm sorry. The 800 free relay was not part of your 68 group.
No. I'm
getting confused with all the gold medals. So you won the 400 and the 1500. It was you were probably on that UCLA 800 relay. That was probably where I'm thinking.
Yeah, in 1970 I was. Yeah.
Okay. And Kinsella, who is our next guest. Let's bring in John Kinsella, was one of your biggest rivals. There he is. Now, John was a youngster. He wasn't born until 52, so he swam in high school. And John Kinsella, for those of you that don't understand, John Kinsella won the Sullivan Award for the AAU's most outstanding athlete, not swimmer, athlete, while he was still in high school in 1970. I mean, and he got the silver medal to the gentleman just above him in the 68 games in the 1500. USA went 1-2. John's world records came in the 400 and 1500 in 1970. And John, you were the one I'm thinking. You won the gold medal in the 72 games as part of that relay with Spitz and those guys, right?
Right.
So,
Spitz and Tyler and Jenner.
John, tell us where you are, what you're doing.
Well, I'm in New Buffalo, Michigan, courtesy of all the stuff that's going on normally in the Chicagoland area, but we got a house here in New Buffalo. So I just took a swim in the pool. This hiatus, or whatever you want to call it, is getting me back in shape. So that's a good thing. I've been a financial advisor for 40 years, and thankfully, most of that can be done with a phone and a computer.
Well, that's pretty awesome. So before we bring in our third guest, because I know he's got a couple connection issues, I wanted to talk a little bit about 68, because I did some research on those trials. And Mike, you had some experience. I guess, John, you were pretty new coming in. The 1968 Olympic trials, if I'm not mistaken, they were in Belmont Plaza, which was a pretty new pool. And the girls' meet was the week before over in the LA Coliseum. So the setup must have been a little bit strange if you guys had girls on your team or women that you were training with, or back in the 60s. Tell me your prep and your thinking. Let's go first with you, Mike. Tell me, going into the 68 games, you'd been to trials once before. What was your mindset and what was your intent? You were already the world record holder. You set your first world record in 1966 in the mile. What was your intent?
Well, my intent was to just keep training, and we had a great assistant coach in Mike Hastings. And when Sherm left with the girls, all he said to Hastings was, "Get them ready." And Hastings was really nervous about it and everything else. So he and I we'd have a discussion every day on the pool deck before practice, and as to what we think we should work on that day. And I'll tell you what, I probably got the most rest I ever got prior to a big meet. Just talking to Mike, working things out. And then when we went to Long Beach, it all paid off.
That's awesome. And John, you were heading into the 68 games. What was your mindset as the young guy?
Well, keep in mind, I didn't even have a clue that I had a chance at the Olympic team until the indoor nationals in 68 in North Carolina State, or East Carolina. East
Carolina University in Greenville, North Carolina.
Greenville, North Carolina. There you go. So I got second to Greg. I'm forgetting his last name, but that kind of like clued me in. Gee, maybe I have a chance to make the Olympic team. I spent the entire summer at the Air Force Academy training with a friend of mine and the coach Arata at altitude, and then went down for the trials in Long Beach. And so I don't know if it was presumptuous or whatnot, but my coach Don Watson set me up with that, and so I was young and full of piss and vinegar, and really didn't know any better. Well,
speaking of guys full of piss and vinegar, I'd like to bring in our third guest, another world record holder from the great state of California, the mayor of Mission Viejo, Brian Goodell. Welcome.
Hey, Mike. Hey, John.
Hey, Brian.
Thanks for joining. I know Brian just rushed home from City Hall and he's got other business tonight, but I appreciate you carving out an hour for us. Brian, these guys, to you and me, were legends. They were heroes. So what was your first kind of connection with, and tell us a little bit, if you want to welcome us. You're here in Mission Viejo. You're the mayor. The first mayor we've had on the Swim Monkey. And with everything going on in the world, geez, how is it being mayor? How many months have you actually led that city now?
Well, I became mayor on January 1st, and I had a couple of good months. And I've had a lot of bad months since then. But it's actually a really great city, and we have a great staff, and they're doing a super job. And so mostly falls to me and my council colleagues to deal with the complainers. But anyhow, it's been interesting. It's been very interesting and challenging, and puts me at my wits' end most days.
Well, I'm
Just
certain
dealing with people complaining about stuff that, really no one has any control over. So it's kind of like, well, what do you want to do?
I agree. Well, certainly some of that distance training and that you guys, I mean, when I think, like, people say, oh, you're a good distance swimmer, I think, yeah, I was. And then I think, oh man, the three guys I got on tonight, all at one time, were the very best in the world in the 1500. And I want to bring up a couple facts about the 1500 at the Olympic Games, especially, but just here in my research, here's what I found out about the world record. Let's talk world record in the 1500. The first one was in 2008. That was the first time it was in the Olympic Games. And that was the only one in that decade that was set, obviously. And then in the 2000, what do they call it? Not the Roaring 20s, the teens. I don't know what you call it, but it was broken once in 2012. So once in each of those decades. 1912. And then in 1920s, in the 1920s, it was broken 6 times, but 5 of those were by the same guy, a guy named Arne Borg from Sweden. And he had a brother that swam in the Olympics too, but he broke it 5 different times. But ultimately, Borg did not win the Olympic gold. He got the silver, much as in one of our Americans, my good friend, RIP, the great George Breen. But what happened to Borg in the early, did you know this, in the 1500, and maybe some of you remember it, but from the very first time it was in the Olympics, 1908, until 1948, it was the heats, the semifinals, and then the finals. 3 days in a row you swim the 1500. Did you know that, Brian?
No.
Did you know, Mike, they used to swim it 3 times?
No, I did not know that. They had to be tough.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And I'm just curious, John, if you're okay there. Well, we got you mute. Could you do that 1500 3 days in a row? It's a lot of strategy.
Yeah, I never thought of that. The only I remember in '72 being in the training room when Steve Prefontaine came in, and he was what, Mike?
You could have done it.
Well, I think I could have, but he was complaining about having to run the 5,000 one day, have a day off in between, and then having to run it the third day.
Right.
So I'll never forget that. But I think I could. Sure. I mean, we all could. We were in great shape. It probably would have been more like they do in the velodrome cycling, where everyone just kind of waits everyone out till the last 100 and then sprints to the wall.
well, here I'm going to.
Mike and I would have been out of luck there.
I think he could. So anyway, what I'm getting at is in the 1920s, okay, it was broken 6 times, but 5 of them were by the same guy. In the 30s, it was broken 1 time by one man, a Japanese guy, Amano Tomakatsu, and he didn't even have a Wikipedia page, so I couldn't deal to. But in the 40s, it was broken twice, both Japanese guys. Of course, those were the war years, and there were a lot of asterisks going up. In the 1950s, the 1500 world record was broken 4 times by 3 swimmers, twice by George Breen, including the trials and the prelims in Melbourne Olympics in 56. Now, in the 60s and the 70s, this is where I'm at, the meat. This is what I'm talking about, because this is when distance swimming, especially in our country, took off. 10 times it was broken in the 60s, 11 times in the 70s. Since then, in the 80s, 3 times, in the 90s, 4 times, but it was 2 different men, and Perkins did it 3 times. And then after Grant Hackett's unbelievable 1434 in Fukuoka, the only man who has broken it, according to FINA, is Sun Yang, and that's a big asterisk, because that's a China and a drug issue that certainly they're still working out. But talking about the 60s and 70s, here's my details, and I want to hear from you guys. In the 60s, Roy Sorry from the USA did it twice, and he was the first man under 17 minutes. Mike Burton, you did it 4 times in the 60s. And the first time you set the world record was in Lincoln, Nebraska, 1966, 1641.6. Do you remember that swim?
I do.
Okay, so in 1966 in Lincoln, you break the world record with a 1641. 3 years later at Nationals in Louisville, you go 1604.5. So you're 37 seconds faster. And those are the years now where Kinsella is starting to enter the picture and starting to push you a little bit. And in the 70s, 11 times that world record was broken by 6 different swimmers. The first one was you, John Kinsella. You were the first man in the 70s. And you were also the first man under 16 minutes in LA with a 15:57. And the last 2 world records of that decade, Brian, both came from you in the trials at Long Beach in 76. And then, of course, that unbelievable race in the 76 finals where you went 15:02. And so, gentlemen, that to me says the 3 of you, along with some other greats, certainly we can't rule out Rick DeMont, and that created a whole different thing when we talk about 72 Olympics, and love Rick. We'll hope we'll get him in someday. But would you agree, and what made the difference? Tell me, starting with you, Mike, we'll kind of go chronologically, Mike, John, Brian. What was it about the 60s and 70s in swimming where the records just took off? What was it, Mike?
Well, I think it was due. We started out years ago kind of copying what the track guys were doing as far as how they trained and everything else. And in fact, when we got to Lincoln, Nebraska, Spitz was, he just finished breaking the world record in the 1500 at Foothill College at just an AAU meet. And he was swimming it in the finals at Lincoln, Nebraska, and he was in the lane next to me. And he comes over and he says, Mike, I really don't want to swim this race. And I looked at him and I said, Mark, I want to swim this race more than anything else in the world. And so when the gun went off, I took off and I ended up lapping Mark, and also, of course, breaking his world record at the time. So, it was time for swimming to really bust loose, and it did. And
I got it. John, what do you take? You were with the great Doc Councilman for a while. You grew up, of course, under Don Watson. What was it that you found that really led to, especially in the mile, but those times in the 60s and 70s?
I think a lot of it was imagination and, creating the thought, right? And, I wanted to beat Mike, obviously. And it just seemed like if you didn't get better and faster, you were, if you were standing still, or you're going backwards if you were just standing still. So I think a lot of it had to do with, maybe it was timing, like Mike said, but also, we were, I knew I had to beat Mike if I was going to be, if I was going to be the best. So, it's partly the competition as well.
Okay. And Brian, what do you think?
Well, I started swimming in 66 as a 6-year-old or 65 as a 6-year-old. So I didn't really, that was up in Walnut Creek in Northern Cal, where Mike was swimming up in Sacramento area. And I didn't really know that much about the national or international swimming scene at that point. But when I got down to Mission Viejo, we moved here in 1968, and my parents helped found the swim club here, the Nadadores. And when Schubert came in as my coach, he was very young and full of piss and vinegar, like you talk about, and wanted to win the nationals was the thing. And I was only, I was 12 when he got here. And then when I was 13, I saw Mike and Mark Spitz and all those guys swimming in the 72 Olympics, and John. It was the most exciting thing I'd ever seen. I watched it on TV. I raced home every day from school to watch it, and from swim practice at night. And that's when I got the dream to do it. But I was still just a backstroker, and I am mainly in age group swimming at that point. And as luck would have it, Schubert one time entered me. He entered everybody into a meet where we all swam the 1500, and I negative split it. And all of a sudden he said, "Oh, I think I got a D-man here." And so he converted me. And at that point, I was behind a couple other young guys, but I was chasing Tim Shaw basically in the local area here, and he was chasing you guys from behind. And Bobby Hackett was across the country. So it's kind of like there was I think that you guys paved the way, and then all of a sudden there was this like big cloud of dust behind you, and everyone trying to catch you guys, and just got inspired. And I was young and dumb enough not to care what event I swam or what I trained for, and then and it obviously worked out okay for me. But but that's, I think my backstroke and my IM came in pretty handy at NC2As later on because I swam the 400 pretty well.
Yeah, I'd say so. You know, I wanted to get to the IM and get, you know, Mike had a great 200 fly. You had a great 400 IM. Kinsella, did you do anything other than freestyle?
Only senior in high school, I did the 200 IM because we lacked an IMer. I set a state record in Illinois, but my breaststroke was not too swift.
Yeah, mine either.
That's okay. We know you did the ultra marathon, so we'll give you a break there. But when we talk Olympic Games, so 68, both you two guys are there, and I think, Brian, for me, because I'm a couple years older than you, like you're saying 72 is your first memory. I remember 68. I was reading Sports Illustrated as a little kid, and we were starting to get Swimming World. And I remember, because I do have to give a tip of the hat to Brent Rutenmiller and the guys at Swimming World and the International Swimming Hall of Fame, because they've got this great program going on, 1 in 1,000. I'm a part of it. Or do you guys, do any of you belong to the Swimming Hall of Fame, International Swimming Hall of Fame? You do, Brian. I know you guys are in it. Listen, I'll tell you, and I'll tell everybody who's watching, get with Brent Root, look up International Swimming Hall of Fame. They got this great program going on right now. It's called 1 in 1,000. And basically you commit to giving $25 a month, maybe 50, whatever you want to do. But it's going to help us as this place opens up and we build a place to remember guys like this. So go to the Hall of Fame. They helped me with a lot of the research here. And when I learned about the 68 games, Mike and John, was that very, very few people, of course, the altitude, came back from those September Olympic trials and performed any faster or even close. When I looked at that 400 free, Mike, it seems like you went 4:19 in the morning, but 4:09 to win it. And maybe 4:06 was your world record from earlier in the year, which I could see 4:06 to 4:09. But the other Americans and the rest of the guys were up 4:20. One guy went 4:26. Do you two remember those games being that difficult?
Well, we had the other problem too of the turista, and I got sick.
Oh.
And I didn't even know if I was going to be able to swim the 400. So when it came time to swim the preliminaries, I went as easy as I could to get into the finals. And then afterwards, George Haynes sought me out in the ready area where we got our rub downs and stuff like that. And he said, "How do you feel?" And I said, "I don't know. I'm kind of woozy here." But he says, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, "Well, I want to know what you think. You know, what do you think it's going to take to win?" And he said, "Well, you know, the Australians think they're going to go about 4:11, and the Frenchman, Alain Mosconi, maybe 4:12. And so I said, I looked at him and I said, with a straight face, "I'm going to go 4:09." And I ended up going 4:09. So it was.
And nobody close to you?
No, there was nobody close.
Nobody close.
Ralph Hutton had a great swim at that meet. You know, he was second, and then Mosconi was third. So yeah,
we're still wishing he went faster at trials.
Yeah,
400.
Yeah, really. And also, Mike's absolutely right. I did a 1500 a week before my event, and I think my time was 17:06. It was just I was just cruising. The next day, I got Montezuma's Revenge, and I got a great story to tell. It was great from my perspective. I was young. I was 16. I was going into junior in high school, and I'd been away for 5 months, and I got sick. I got Montezuma's Revenge, and I go, well, no one can blame me for. I made the Olympic team, so no one can really fault me. I was this close to giving up, and just before the finals, George Haynes came up. He grabbed me by the elbow, and he looked me in the eye with those steely blue eyes, and he said, "You've worked really hard for this. Now make it count." And just like that, all the clouds over my head dissipated. I knew I was just going for second. I had the blinders on for the silver medal. I didn't even care about Mike. I didn't care about anybody else. I was just right in the moment. And that shows you what a great coach can do right in the moment.
George Haynes was fantastic with that. He was.
Brian, you had George the year that we shared at UCLA, Brian. How did George affect you?
Well, I went to UCLA because of George Haynes, and I wanted to swim with him, and he'd been one of the coaches on the 76 staff. So I got to know him better there. And then, and that was the year before my senior year in high school. And then I went to swim for George at UCLA, and he was fantastic. He was really great. And I know what you're talking about, John, when those blue steely eyes look right into your soul. He sat me and Bob Plasek down on the bench at that SC meet in the dungeon when it came down to the final relay, and I was sick at that one. I had the flu or something. I'd already swum I think I swam a 500 and 1,000.
Yeah.
And I had a fever, and George says, I need a 46 flat or better out of one of you guys. And he looked at me, and I just said, I don't know, George. And he looked at Plasek, and Plasek says, I can do it, coach. And I said, I held my breath through that whole relay, and we won, and then we beat SC in the dungeon.
I was there. I'll tell you what, Mike, as a UCLA guy, and even John, I know at Indiana you guys didn't have a lot of competition. Maybe USC when they were starting to come up, and everybody could hate USC if you were UCLA, right, or Indiana. But that meet Brian's talking about, that short course yard meet in the dungeon, Peter Dalen had not lost a meet there in over 2 decades, since the 50s. And I went there as a red shirt. I'm training with George I'm really thinking, I'm like, this is unbelievable. I remember standing on the 3-meter ladder steps, watching the meet. That last relay, Dan Stevenson and Bruce Furness coming at it. And Stevenson touches him out. We had a huge UCLA contingent in there. We had told the sororities and fraternities we would give a keg to the biggest, Greek organization that got over to the dungeon. And I think we had more fans than they had in Maroon over there. But Mike, you had some UCLA, and Brian and Mike, I know we'd be remiss if UCLA, one of the greatest men's swimming programs for 3 or 4 decades in a row, always in the top 10. Is there any hope in the future with everything else going on? Do you think we'd ever see it back again? I know everybody asks you, but what do you think, Mike?
I think the way that things are going financially for the universities and colleges across the nation, we're going to lose sports more than we're going to gain them back.
Yeah, sadly.
Sad thing. I don't know if I was dreaming or having a nightmare, but I thought I heard one of the newscasters on CBS News say that Stanford's dropping all of their sports.
Just about. Yeah, they dropped 11 Olympic sports, and I think a few others as well, including men's volleyball, if you can believe that. But
so I have a question. How did you guys get back swimming in the dungeon? Because we went to a neutral place, Beverly Hills High School, where they filmed a movie where the basketball opens up and they fall in the pool. That's Beverly Hills High School, and that's where we had our meets. And
I don't know how we did that, but
I think Peter kind of sweet talked George, and George being kind of a new NCAA coach was like, oh, okay, it would be better if we had it on our campuses, don't you think? Yeah.
Well, yeah, but we had a great facility at UCLA. It was beautiful.
Yeah. So 72 games. You two guys are there. Brian and I are watching on TV. But Mark Spitz is the big story. Everything's about Spitz. And that's great. And it's deservedly so. Although, I did get the Don Easterling, Doug Russell story a lot in college from the 68 games, Mike. And we could talk that story too. But Spitz is unbelievable. But what you did, Burton, and what the team did, having you come back to set the stage. If you don't remember young people, Rick DeMont would be here instead of me as the fourth of the 4, Mount Rushmore 1,500 guys of the 60s and 70s, because Rick was up and coming. And Mike, as I recall, you had gotten very sick, and a lot of us younger guys are going, Mike Burton's coming back for the 72 or what was it, the 72 trials? He was a star in 68. Why is he going to come back? And Rick was up and coming. Rick set the world record in the 1,500 at the trials. And Mike, after performing not so well because of illness, as I read, in the 400, your 1,500, you're going into it. What are you thinking? Last chance to make the team.
That's it. That was the last chance. All I had to do is, eat all but 2 guys. and I could be there. And that's what I was trying to do. And when I hit the wall at the finish, I was really surprised. And
third place.
Of course, Mark was swimming with Arden Hills at the time, and he came over and congratulated me. And Debbie Myers crying at the end of my lane, and so I started crying. And it was a really tough swim because I got to get some of that prevision stuff that helps with your memory. But there was a guy that swam, I think, for Gamble, who was actually really coming on at the end of the race, and he could have beat me. But really
John,
tall.
Who was that? Who was that, Mike?
Well, I'm trying to come up with his name.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I should know.
Tingley? Was it Jack Tingley?
Tingley. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was Jack Tingley, and he was a very scary guy. He was big and tall, and he was coming, and I could see him.
Yeah. Was he even bigger than you, John? You remember Tingley?
Oh yeah. He was a big boy. He beat me in the Belmont pool in '74 in C2As.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was there at that meet as a freshman in high school. I was there in the stands.
Oh, really?
Watching you guys. Yeah.
Yeah.
And John, what do you remember of that trials?
Oh, the '72 trials.
Yeah.
I started off with a bang in the 200, and then I hadn't been training very well, and it was the most disappointing meet of my life. I mean, what can I tell you? I didn't make.
And so, John, wasn't it shortly after those games that you got into your professional career?
Well, I graduated in '74 and then that summer, the summer of '74 is when I started with the 24-hour marathon at Latuke.
So we'll come back to that, and we're going to do a marathon story. I'm going to have you back with a couple marathon swimmers. But Brian,
somebody just asked about preparation in with the terrorist attack in Munich. That happened after the swimming was over. Just for the point of record.
That's what I wanted to get to, is that you two guys are there. We're watching on TV. We're doing, and I remember being so excited just to watch swimming every night. I was like Brian. I would run, I'd get on, watch TV. For all we knew, it was live. I mean, I know that they probably delayed it on the East Coast or whatever, but we weren't looking it up on the internet. That's for sure. And and so when that happened, the whole world stopped. Much as a horrible thing. What did you have to go through? So, Mike, you're just coming off of here you are. I didn't get to finish the story about Rick DeMont. I got so crazy talking about you guys. Rick DeMont sets a world record and then declares on his form one of the tragedies of administration error in Olympic history. He is taking an inhaler the way probably 30% of my athletes do now, and declared it. And whoever the USOC doctor was, this is just my interp, and you guys probably know it a lot better. Anyway, Rick was disqualified after he won the 400 freestyle. So he was to give back his gold medal. The world record didn't count. And then the 72, the three guys in the 1500 for the USA were now down to two, and Burton, you were one of them. So as you stepped up, this is a guy who barely made the team, and they're thinking, oh, he's the old guy. Oh, and remember, your world record that you had set at the end of the 60s was 16:07, I believe. And then, you already knew that Rick had broken that world record at the trials, and he had beaten you, by a considerable amount at the trials. Now he's not even in it. You've got to be the standard bearer for the USA. Tell us about that 68 1500, Mike. Come on.
For me, we had another stellar coach that was handling the distance guys, and that was Don Gambrell. And when, I got up the morning of the final of the 1500, I was noticing that, Rick was not being his usual self. He was not getting prepared to swim. I was in the shower reshaving, getting everything in order, because it was going to be, no matter who won, it's going to be a tough race. And I just kept watching him. And then when we went down to get into the little bus to take us over to the pool, we had to wait for Rick to show up. And I was just wondering, what's going on, and so finally we get over the pool and get in for warm up, and Don's there, and he's telling me to do this, do that, and the other thing, and finally we got finished up, and we reported to the ready room like we were supposed to, and then all of a sudden Don stuck his head inside the room and motioned for Doug and I to come out, and I said, Don, what's going on? He says, Rick's been disqualified. He's not going to be in the race. And he said it with like tears coming out of his eyes. And he was very emotional, which got me very emotional. And so when we walked out around the pool, I just kept this thing inside, just kept building that I was going to try to win. And when that gun went off, of course, I was never a negative splitter. I wish I had the speed to do that, but it just didn't happen. But I took off, and I was going against Graham Windiet. Windiet passed me after about 300 meters, maybe 400, and then I had to make up some time there. And I don't know, I just noticed that he was kind of faltering on his turns and not coming off the walls well, and I started coming off the walls as hard as I could, and ended up winning the race, not by a lot, but still winning. And breaking the world record by just a little bit.
World record. Pretty awesome. And that is a great story.
It's a great way to go out.
in that race in 72, yeah, what a way to go out, Burton. I mean, that's incredible. And it set the stage for the young guy right in the bottom left box there, Brian Goodell. So Brian, you got to watch that when you said you saw the trials in Long Beach that year when you were a young guy.
No, actually, I didn't go to trials. I went to NC2As in '74. That's when I saw John swim against Steve Furness and what's
Tingley.
Yeah,
Jack Tingley.
Yeah, in that 1650 race at the end, because that was a close meet, and Indiana and SC were down to the wire on the last night.
One point
win for SC.
Yep.
Yeah. But so I was a freshman in high school. I was there with Taylor Howard and Mark Schubert. We were watching that meet. It was amazing, and that was the first time I'd really ever seen anything like that. I was at the Nationals at the Coliseum pool. I think it was in 70 or 72. Not sure. It was outdoors. 70, yeah. 70. I was 10 years old or something. And
I know. I was 12 when I was living in Kinston, North Carolina, when we hosted John and Mike and those guys at 68 in East Carolina. And I'll never forget how it impacted us, just in the local region, having these elite swimmers come in. And so, Brian, your story kind of evolves because you and Mike both were like smaller guys compared to guys like Tingley or certainly John Kinsella. Both of you guys are under 5'10", and I'll never forget. And I tell this to my swimmers all the time, Mike. I love hearing that story about your turns and you focusing on the turns. I tell this Goodell story. I don't even know if he remembers it, but my first day as a transfer at UCLA, we're in practice, and it's January. I've been swimming on my own for a semester, and George Haynes took me in really because of Peter Brown. I saw Janie Barkman. I saw her say hi. But the idea was, I'm just going to get behind Goodell. He's coming in as a freshman. He's the world record holder. If I can swim in his lane, And I was transferring in after 3 years at North Carolina State. So every time we go under the flags, I see the kick pick up. And then Brian, boom, boom. It's like, it didn't matter the set. It didn't matter what we were doing. And then we're in the shower afterwards. I say, hey, Goodell, was today turn day or something? What the hell was going on out there? And he looked at me kind of and I'll never forget it. He said, I said, yeah, you were going in and out of the wall. So I said, I don't even think about it anymore. He said, when I was about 11 or 12, I learned about the birds and the bees. And I looked at my parents, and they were both pretty short people. And then I was in a lane with guys like, Billy Babashoff and long, gangly, I got this idea that if I could really be compact and really get in and out of the walls faster than these uncoordinated 12-year-olds, I could be the best guy doing turns, and I could go faster. And I know, Brian, I swear to God, I have told hundreds of kids that in my 30 years of coaching, 40 years of coaching. And And to me, that's the mind of a champion. Do you remember, Brian, that particular mindset?
I do. Yeah. And I remember that day when you asked me that, whoa, is it turn day or something? I mean, you were kind of like smug about it. And I was like, I said, yeah, my parents weren't going to be that tall. I realized I wasn't going to be very tall. And and I was thinking I'm swimming against John Neighbor over there and, 6'6", Tim Schott, 6'1" or 2. And I thought, God, I got to turn this into an advantage somehow. And it really did. It saved my bacon almost every race, my turns. I could just turn and just blow some people away. And that became, one of my signature moves. Now, and I swam today too, John, and now my knees hurt so much I can't do those fast turns anymore when I push off the wall. But I'm working on it. I'm trying to get better at it.
Oh, it's time to switch to open water. You got plenty of good water there in Mission Viejo. But Mike, do you remember your turns that race? John, Mike, you were always good in the butterfly as well. Did you feel like your butterfly turns improved, or you were equal or better than anybody else?
I didn't think about the butterfly turns as much as I did as the freestyle. I just didn't do it. But in '70 at the Nationals in the Los Angeles Coliseum pool, I broke 3 world records. I got beat by 3 different guys. Well, 2 different guys. John beat me twice, and Gary Hall beat me in the 200 fly. So I lost 3 gold medals by about 80 some hundredths of a second. But
remember that meet, John?
That was like in Louisville in '69, where I called my parents after the 400. I said, I got some good news and some bad news. Well, what's the good news? I broke the world record. What's the bad news? Well, 2 guys broke it before me. But that race with Mike was that was the pinnacle, for me, because obviously, we knew who the competition was. There was no, it was him and me, and I wanted to break the world record in the 800. So after about at the 750 or at the 700, I press and I go ahead of Mike. I didn't get I do a flip turn. I didn't get the record. I think I missed it by 0.2 of a second, but I was kind of like afraid because I'd gotten ahead of him so easily. And so I backed off and we battled it out and I won by 0.2 of a second. That was a great race, right, Mike?
I'm sure it was greater for you, John. Go ahead, Mike.
Mike doesn't remember that race.
That was the best, wasn't it, Mike?
I beat John Kinsella one time. And it's like, I can remember it. He probably has no remembrance, but it was Atlantic City around the Island Marathon. And it was my home turf. And it was, but beating a legend or somebody like that, it really doesn't, there are guys who get beat. Like, I'm sure, you're not thinking of it the way a guy like Mike, like, yeah. Like, John, I know you weren't in great shape that time. And but it meant a lot to me.
It was meant a lot to me to beat Mike in that race. So,
Brian, do you have a few guys in the Southern California area you were chasing as a young guy when you beat him for the first time? Maybe Rick Wines. Who was that? Who was it you had to beat?
Oh, on Mission. Well, Taylor Howe was the guy on our team that I trained with every day, and he was really tough. And when I started beating him, and then Casey Converse came out and trained with us, and Billy Babashoff, like you mentioned, and we had, that's where the Animal Lane came together with all those characters. Oh yeah. So we had battles every day in practice, which was very valuable experience. And then we were all chasing after Tim Shaw and Bruce Furness and Bobby Hackett, which we didn't get to see him much except at nationals,
Tony Barlow and I saw Hackett a lot. So we saw plenty of Bobby. We'll get him on one time. He's a great guy. And that race that you and Hackett and the Australian Steve Holland had, and Holland was one who broke the world record multiple times, four times maybe in the 70s, but he ended up with the bronze medal. Tell us about that 1500 race, Goodell, because that's the Radar Love race, man. I want to hear your story. Tell us a little bit about that story.
Mike's time in 72 at 1552 was like a huge deal, right? And then between 72 and 76, in 4 years, we dropped it 50 seconds. So it was like every, I don't know, 3 months or 4 months, it seemed like someone was breaking a record in that. And it was usually Tim Shaw or Stephen Holland. And I was usually racing behind them, like coming in second or third or fourth or somewhere in the pack, but I was chasing them. And then, and Furness would, in the lower races, the 400 and the 200 and stuff like that. And 200 IM, I raced Bruce Furness at my sophomore year at CIF finals in the 200 IM. He beat me by 3 seconds, but I got second. But anyhow, and I raced Tim Shaw too as a sophomore. We both broke the American record in the 500-yard freestyle, faster than what the NCAA winning time was. And but he beat me. So I had a lot of those where I was touched out by somebody where we broke a record. But anyhow, that race in 76 was pretty amazing because we were all really young. I was 17, Bobby was 16, Holland was 18, I think. I think Holland might have been the oldest guy in the race. And, there was some kid from Hungary or something who was like 14. He's standing there on the deck, on the box. And Salnikov was over in lane 8.
Yeah. And
anyhow, we had a great race. And I was kind of frozen before the race. I got nervous, and like you were saying, the big clouds over your head. Well, I was laying on the rub down table, and Selden Fitchner was rubbing me down, and he's talking about the race. And pretty soon I was laying on the table shaking. I was so nervous. I was shaking, and he thought I was cold. So he started putting towels over me. And eventually he realized I wasn't cold. I was scared to death. And so he took me to another place mentally. He said, "What are you going to do when the Olympics are over, Brian?" And I thought, I'm going to go camping with my buddies up in the Sierras. We're going to go fishing. It's going to be great. You can't have any pressure when you're fishing in the Sierras, And then some of the guys were talking about going surfing in Hawaii. And so basically I got to go to my happy place instead of being there and being all scared. And so, but by the time I got back up, went out and we did the ready room and we went out on the blocks and everything, I was standing there. I hyperventilated so much I couldn't feel my arms or legs. And so when we dove in, everything seemed like slow motion. And for me, for about the first 600 or 700 meters, I was just trying to figure out where I was and what I was doing. And Bobby Hackett had already taken about a 2 body length lead over me. And then at 700, Steve Holland came up and passed me, and then he passed Bobby. And boy, we got into about to 1100 meters in that race, and I was dying. And I looked ahead and I thought, geez, I don't know if I can catch these guys, but if I'm gonna, I got to go now. And so that's when I started. I really started turning over, and I saw Steve Barnicoat just said, "Talk about Radar Love." I had a song that I played in my head that got me going, and Radar Love by Golden Earring, and I started playing that beat in my mind, and boom, the last 400, I came home in a 3:56.9, I think.
Which would have medaled, right?
And if you watch that race, yeah, would have won the gold in 72, right, Mike?
Yep.
What was I going to say? Oh, the turns. So the turns came into play on that last 400. Suddenly, I was just swallowing up yardage between me and the other guys on turns coming off the walls. And you'll see it specifically going into the very last turn. Hackett and I are like face to face, looking at each other, going into the wall. And I just, boom, I creamed him off the wall. And Stephen Holland had horrible turns and just destroyed him on the last 400 on those turns. And so that's what really made the difference, I think, for me. And I come in at 15:02. And of course, I was a little bit bummed I didn't go under 15. I thought I would, but I was so whacked out nervous at the start of that race. I'm just happy to finish the race.
Right.
and I won the gold. And so that's what I was happy about. It was 15:02. It was a new world record by 4 seconds. So that was pretty awesome too. But all three of the medalists broke the old world record at 15:06.
And then we all went out to Old Montreal that night. Or was it the next night? It might have been
A couple nights later, I hope.
But Mike or John,
talk about that.
we can't. No, you're a politician. You're right. We got to keep it straight, right? But how about music? Because I looked a little into this, and Mike, I wanted to hear when you were John. Did you guys play music in your head during distance stuff, Mike?
Oh, maybe in practice, but never in the meet. It was when I was in a race. It was like looking left, looking right, see who's there. Hopefully they're not there. And if they are, try to just get away from them.
So would you self-talk? Would you talk to yourself?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was all positive, getting ahead, and winning. It was a lot of self-talk.
That's cool. What about you, John?
I have a song that I'll probably remember after the broadcast, but in '68 at Belmont, I sang it the whole 1500, and it just worked with my stroke and kept me in rhythm. So yeah, I did that a lot in marathon as well.
Was that the Mickey Mouse song? One time we were in practice at Mission Viejo, and Jesse Vasayo comes into the wall. He's like, "I got that Mickey Mouse song in my head, and I can't get it."
Yeah, I could see Jesse
ready to punch himself face. He's like,
well, Jim Lewis here, Radar Love. I love that Radar Love story. I told that at a coaching clinic to a guy who early in my career, and he was giving the lecture, and he said, "Oh yeah, psychomusicology, it works, blah, 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 blah." And I was like, "Oh," because I would do the same. And John, you remember maybe that one, I would have a boom box hanging over the back of the lifeguard boat just so I could hear music. Because to me, it was like rhythm. I think Tony Bartle says he saw so much of Bobby Hackett that he became a 200 butterfly. I know we'll get Tony and Bobby on because I love those guys and all of us in that era when we looked up to you guys. One of the things that I thought Mike and John and Brian, like the toughness, the core, like were there things you did in practice? Was there any one set or one type of practice or something that you did? And we'll start with you, Mike, and we'll come down that you just remember doing, and it was like it made you tougher than everybody else.
Well, I want to say hello to Jack Ridley out there watching, and also Janie Barkman, two good friends of mine.
Hi, Janie.
Yeah, the thing with Sherm, he was I find this highly unusual. John, I heard Doc Kinsella was a bomber pilot during World War II.
Right.
Well, so was Sherm. And these, two guys like that becoming coaches and having great success and everything was just amazing. But Sherm was not really creative. We would jump in the water, and sometimes we'd get in before he even showed up and kick 1,000 yards. And then we put our boards up and we put on a 6-inch in diameter inner tube, and we would pull 2100s, 10 200s. These are our choices: 2100s, or we do 10 200s, or we do 5 400s, and then we take the inner tube off and swim the same thing. And then we would get into stroke work, like the butterfly, backstroke, and our breaststrokers would swim breaststroke then. But we all it was that kind of thing every single day. And, you coach swimmers nowadays, Mike, these practices are so boring, and I just have to tell them, I said, I did all these practices when I was your age. I wasn't bored. Okay. There's only boring swimmers. There is no boring practices.
That was Sherm Shavor.
Yeah.
And he had you, and he had Mark Spitz there then too, right?
Well, yeah, and Debbie Meyer, Sue Peterson, Johnny Ferris.
Everybody. All world record holders right there in your lanes.
Yeah, and Susie and Debbie were constantly, butting heads all during practice. And so I figured out that, these guys, the summer of '68 especially, they were breaking world records in practice. We swam in a 55-yard pool. And I said, I went home and I figured out and got the world records for women in the 400, 1500, 800, and stuff like that. And whatever we did, I tried to break the women's world record. And when I was doing that, I was just a little bit ahead of those guys, those girls. And that's how I trained and learned to race.
What made you tough, Kinsella?
I think that reminds me of a set of 500s I did freshman year at IU, where the last one, I think it was 8 or 10 500s. The last one I broke the NC. I think I went 432 at the time. The record was it was either 432, 433, or 433, 434. But that just showed, I think we overtrained a lot of the times and weren't really rested and tapered. I wasn't a lot of times. I was doing too much. But Brian, I understand you're hanging out with Montrella and Urbanchek these days. So please give them my best regards, will you?
Sure will.
Yeah. So we had Don Watson had like what he'd call get in the yardage days, and then he'd have like set days. So that was great psychologically for me, because in the get in the yardage days, sometimes I had my best workouts because I was just goofing around, and then all of a sudden it started getting faster and faster and faster. Now, like the serious set days were like 8 400s or 2200s, right? 2200s, or the big one in the summer was 10 1500s. That was the kind of crazy one. But they were where you're expected to like push it the whole way, right?
Right.
So,
Brian, of course,
we didn't know what we were doing. Let's be honest.
The legendary animal lane at Mission Viejo and some of the training you did. But when did you first know you were tougher than the others?
I think when I started beating Shirley Babashoff in practice.
Shirley was pretty tough, huh?
Yeah, when I could beat Shirley consistently, then I knew I was going somewhere. And one of the things that I always think of when someone asks a question like that is in '76, when we got close to the trials, we were starting to get into oh, hey, Bobby just showed up.
Joe, send Bobby the link. We can bring him in.
We broke our group down just to people who qualified for trials, and some of their foreign athletes that swam for their Olympic teams or whatever. So basically, I think we had at least 16 athletes in the workout group. So 2 per lane for the 8 lanes of the 50-meter pool, and we had our own separate workout. So no more circle pattern and no more this, no more that, right? And we started and Mark Schubert put the workout times exactly when the times we would be swimming at the trials. So we would get our bodies acclimated to going fast at those times. And so we started doing things like, you mentioned, John, a set of like 2200s. And I remember doing, usually you would start out, it was always descend 1 to 5, and then, faster interval and a faster interval. And I started going out pretty fast on the first one and then descending by tenths rather than by 5, 10, 20 seconds at a time, So everyone comes in. I remember Shirley Babashoff comes in at the wall at the end of the first one. She kind of floats in and she looks right at me, right in the eye, and is like, "What are you doing?" And because I think our interval at that was something like, I don't know, maybe it was 230 or 240 on these 200s, and then it was going to go to 220 and then 210 and then 2 minutes or whatever. And I started out around 205 or 206, and everything had to go faster. But that's where I compressed that down, where I was actually descending by tenths rather than by big chunks of time, like taking it easy, like really resting on the first part of the set. And for me, that's where I think I started to differentiate myself from a normal swimmer who would take advantage of the longer intervals to get more rest. And I was taking advantage of the rest, but after I already, put in the work. And so that was one of the things that I think of when you talk about those sorts of things, is I would try to really attack the sets and not just cruise them.
Well, certainly you guys could not be, any of you, considered normal swimmers. I see Larry Countryman putting a note in. He trained with the Soviets at Mission Viejo. And there's Doc Ludeman. Doc, hey, good to see you, buddy. Larry broke all my team records at Wilmington Aquatic Club. I swam there for Bob Matson. I know he was your coach on one trip, Brian. The great Bob Matson took you to Colombia, maybe? South America, somewhere.
Yeah. We were in right after the Olympics in '76. We went to Rio and to Uruguay and Buenos Aires. Fun trip. Yeah, very fun trip. And I came back on my way home and I stopped in Alabama and went on my recruiting visit with Gambrell was there then and Casey Converse was there. And that was a fun weekend too.
You mean you almost became a member of the Tide?
Well, Gambrell had been my coach on the 76. He was the distance coach on 76 staff. So I really liked him a lot. And Casey and I were really good friends, and we trained together at Mission Viejo for a couple of years before.
So that's what it came to, Alabama, UCLA, final choice?
I don't know about that, but I pretty much, I think, was going to stay in California at one of the California schools. But it came down to George Haynes, I think, for me.
How about you two guys when you were looking at college? John, anywhere but Indiana?
USC and IU were the final. I like Stanford, but they had such a crappy facility back in the day that I couldn't see myself, at 6 a.m. with the steam rising off the pool. I was a Midwesterner, I guess, but SC and IU, and they were pretty sure I was going. Doc was pretty sure I was going to SC, but I tricked him and went to IU. So
how about you, Mike? Did you look anywhere else? You were from Northern California, right? Wait a second, Mike. I'm thinking you got to get that mute.
Okay, I'm on now?
Yep.
All right, well, I actually took a recruiting trip to Madison, Wisconsin, because we had some guys who came out and swam with us that summer. And so they wanted me to come back and visit the school and whatnot like that. And I came back to Sacramento all excited and talked to Sherm. I said, those guys are really great, blah, blah, blah. And he says, yeah, but you're going to UCLA. And with Sherm, that's the way it was. I mean, he was my coach, my mentor, and my best friend. And, whatever he said went, and that's what I did.
And he called you the pocket battleship in that book I read back in middle school.
Well, that was a sports writer in Sacramento that actually did that, and probably the most fun article ever written about me was by the Los Angeles Times writer. I'm not going to get his name out, but he was fantastic. He said the only person that spends more time in the water is King Neptune. And it just went on and on. And he was a humorous writer for the Times for years. I don't know why I can't remember his name. I could probably dig out the article, but it was a great article. I really enjoyed it. I went to a luncheon before the Nationals started in '70 and sat down and talked to him. We just talked. And next morning, this article's in the newspaper, and it was just beautiful.
That's good. Yeah, it's good. I mean, the changes certainly you all have, and I appreciate your time. I know we're already running over time, but it's such a big lineup tonight. I want to give each of you a chance to kind of leave us with some thoughts and anything you want to share. But what I want you to consider is the challenges for coaches and swimmers out there today, just in general, even before the COVID and all of this 2020 unique challenge that is facing us as humanity. So, we're looking at a lot of different things. Swimming has been our core. It's been our strength. Is there anything that you learned specifically that you're carrying through to this day? You guys were all such great role models and great participants in, okay, coach, more? Yeah, I'll do more. Whatever it is, I want to do more. I want to be better. I want to be the best. So as you're kind of signing off, and Brian, we would definitely be back. We're going to have to get Bobby back another time because we'll break down that 1500. I'd love to get some footage, Mike, of that 68 1500. And then, John, we'll find that 1970 race where you actually touch Mike out. Well, I don't know, where. But I want each of you to,
that Jim Murray was the sports writer.
Tim Murray.
Somebody just put it up there, and thank you for doing that. That was very helpful, Joe. Anyway,
Jim Murray. Yeah, so John, so we'll start with you, Mike. We'll go oldest to youngest one more time. Just to sign off tonight, give us any parting thoughts. I really appreciate having you all the way here from Montana, and certainly the stories have been fantastic. Leave us with some gems of wisdom.
Well, I'll tell you what, this has been really exciting for me because, here in Montana, if the name of the sport doesn't end in ball, they don't understand it here. So it's got to be football, basketball, baseball, swimming ball, something like that. And it's sad that way, but anyway, but what's happening around the world in a lot of different places, and especially in Montana, just right now, we have now spiked to where we are the worst state in the union as far as number of cases of COVID. And when it first came out, we were the best. We didn't have that many. And so I just wish that the people that are out spreading this around would get a clue and stay home.
Well,
All right, go ahead, John. Give us something.
I'll try and you learn a lot from who you hang out with. And I was blessed to hang out with some great people, including Mike, Burton, and a lot of other swimmers who are, there were a few bad apples in the bunch, but very few and far between. So that was a real blessing in my life, not to mention the, the kind of focus and discipline you get from pursuing your passion. And that, that comes in different ways in my life nowadays. But the thing I would say, as far as words of wisdom, Sid, as you so succinctly put it, is keep in mind, I think it was Mark Twain said, it's not what you don't know that gets you. It's what you know for sure that just ain't so. So be careful what you assume, because you make an ass of you and me. And there's a lot more going on here, in my opinion, than meets the eye. And I say let the fear go back to the nothingness from which it came. It's not, we're more powerful than that. So let it go, let it be, and pursue your passion, and everything will work out somehow.
Got that, John. I appreciate it. Good thoughts. Good thoughts. Okay, let's hear it from you, Mr. Mayor. I know that you're busy. You have another appointment to take care of tonight. Thanks. And what can you leave us with, Brian?
Well, I guess I would build on what John said. There's a lot of people who don't know what they don't know. And then there's a lot of people who know what they don't know. Right. And then there's those who know what they know. And exactly. Sorry, wife's phone's going off over there.
That's
I'm dealing with it every day here. There's a lot of frustrated people, and there's a lot of people who think, act on half truths and misconceptions, and it's rather frustrating. And so we do the best we can to understand that we're going to be okay. Somehow we're going to be okay. It's all going to work out. At least that's my perspective. I think the long view is better than that the sky is falling. And I do try to listen to everybody very carefully, and then respond as best I can from what I do know, and not what I don't know. And there's a heck of a lot of people running around espousing things they don't know anything about. So
true that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It's such crazy.
I just try to stay calm and do positive things we can control, and don't worry about the rest of it so much. I've been involved here in getting the pools back open in California, and it's been a real struggle, and it's going to be a struggle to keep them open, because there's a lot of people who are very negative Nellies. They're like, why can you work out and we can't work out, and this and that, because, they're doing a different sport and a different venue, well, there's different guidelines for different things. So it's always a challenge to kind of keep the focus on the end result we want to achieve. And that's what I try to do. And I think that's what I learned from our sport, is how to focus in on that, those goals, set those goals and really focus in on them and visualize them being done and accomplished, and not letting all the other chatter get in the way.
Well, that's well stated, Brian. And I would have voted for you for mayor, talking like that too. But I think overall, seriously, guys, I see the race club put 3 of the greatest distance freestylers of all time. Well, you guys know the race club is Gary Hall. I mean, that is the Gary Hall who was your teammate and who carried in the flag, and your teammate. And he is going to be with us on the Swim Monkey this Wednesday night. We have a show we call Coach's Happy Hour, and the great Gary Hall. He's the only swimmer, I believe, that's ever carried the flag for the USA in the Olympic Games. He is going to be joined by, Mike, you carried the flag? Oh, wait, you got to get your mic back on before I go on. Go ahead, Mike. Mike, I didn't think you carried. Did you unmute?
You're muted.
It's getting late in Billings, I know.
Maybe Joe can unmute him.
Let me see. Where is Mike?
Munich 72, I carried in the closing ceremonies.
Oh, right.
And the ABC guys up in the booth says, and leading the contingent from the United States, it's Olga Connolly. So nobody really knows I did that.
Well, I'm going to ask Gary. I'm sure Gary knows. He's a student of the sport, and he says Michael Phelps also did it. Okay, so Gary, you were the first. Burton was the first to carry it in the exit. They said, and then Hackett also told us Michael Phelps. That's right. Okay, so it was a pretty good odds. Anyway, along with Mariusz Podluski, who is the Pinecrest head coach down here. He was a great Polish distance swimmer in his day. Mariusz and Gary are going to be with us at 7 p.m. Eastern on Wednesday for a great show with swimmer Joe, Coach Joe, who is our, along with his wife Bess. These are our producers here today. I really, I got to say, I have loved this time with all 3 of you gentlemen. It really has been something that I've been looking forward to all week, but I've been thinking about, because I used to run and get those swimming worlds and read about you, Burton, and then Kinsella, and then John. Well, we're going to have you back for the big open water event one night. We'll get you on, and Brian, we'll get Bobby in here. We'll get you and Bobby, and we'll talk some old stuff. And all 3 of you have continued to give us such great gifts, and we've learned so much just tonight through your stories. So I want to thank you all and thank everyone for watching. We'll be back next week for more stories with Sid.
Thanks, Sid.
Thanks, Sid.
Good night.
See you guys.
Good night, guys.
Fun being with you.
Be good.
Good.
Join us on the Swim Monkey.
Swim
Swim Monkey.